The morning of my work anniversary party, I had three things sitting in my desk drawer: a printed copy of my brother-in-law's NDA, a screenshot of the Venmo transactions he thought I'd never find, and a voicemail from my company's HR director that he didn't know I'd already heard. I hadn't decided yet what I was going to do with any of it. I'd spent 11 years building Hartwell Creative, from a freelance side hustle in my apartment to a 12-person agency with actual clients, actual overhead, actual health insurance. 11 years of skipping vacations, of eating sad desk lunches, of telling my husband we'd take that trip to Portugal next year until next year stopped feeling like a real place. And when the agency finally hit its first 7-figure revenue year, my family threw me a party. My older sister's idea, she called it a milestone celebration, rented out the back room at a restaurant downtown, invited my parents, a few close friends, some colleagues. It was supposed to be a nice night. I should have known better. My sister, I'll call her my sister because that's the only role that matters in this story, married her husband 6 years ago at a ceremony I helped pay for. Not because I was asked, because my mom mentioned quietly over coffee one Sunday that they were a little short on the catering deposit and I was doing well, and wouldn't it be nice? That's how money moved in my family, not through conversations, through suggestions, through guilt wearing the outfit of generosity. Her husband, I'll call him what he is, my brother-in-law, though the word sits wrong in my mouth now, had been working at my agency for 2 years by the time of the party. I'd hired him myself. He had a marketing background, seemed competent enough, and my sister had asked. Again, not directly. Through my mom. The same channel, the same soft pressure, the same, wouldn't it be nice? I gave him a real position, senior account manager, decent salary. I put him on 2 of our biggest client accounts. What I did not do was give him access to our financial systems. Not because I didn't trust him, at the time I think I mostly did, but because I had a rule: family on the org chart still follows the org chart. You don't get to skip hierarchy because you share a last name with the owner's spouse. He didn't love that rule. The first time he brought it up was about 8 months in. Casual, over the shoulder, the way people mention things they've already been thinking about for a long time. I feel like I could contribute more if I had visibility into the budget side. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. I moved on. The second time was in a one-on-one, more direct. He framed it as professional growth. I told him the financial access structure was the same for everyone at his level. He smiled and said, "Sure, absolutely, no problem." The third time wasn't a conversation, it was a discovery. Our bookkeeper, a woman who has worked with me since year 3, who I trust completely, flagged something in the quarterly review. A vendor payment that had gone through an account she didn't recognize. She'd almost missed it. Small amount, unusual routing, easy to overlook if you weren't specifically looking for it. She was looking for it because she's careful and I pay her to be careful. I spent 2 weeks not telling anyone. I had our accountant pull everything. I sat in my car in a parking garage for an hour after reading the first full report because I needed to not be somewhere someone could see my face. The number wasn't enormous. Just under $40,000 over 14 months. Vendor invoices with names that matched real vendors but account numbers that didn't, clean enough that it might have gone unnoticed for years. $40,000 is not nothing. It's 2 salaries. It's a quarter of our emergency operating fund. It's what I paid in taxes last year on money I'd worked for since before my sister started dating this man. I didn't confront him. I called a lawyer first, then HR. Then I sat with the information for another week while the party invitations went out, and my mom texted me about whether I had a preference for the centerpiece flowers. I said I didn't have a preference for the centerpiece flowers. The party was on a Friday, 60-something people, nice restaurant, open bar, the kind of event where someone gives a toast and everyone laughs at the right moments. My parents flew in from Arizona. My sister wore a dress I'd seen her shopping for the week before, lavender, the kind she knew looked good on her. My brother-in-law stood next to her near the bar when I arrived and shook my hand and told me I deserved this, every bit of it. I smiled. I thanked him. I got a drink. The toast started around 8. My business partner went first, said kind things, got a little emotional, made a joke about the early days when we were running campaigns out of my kitchen. My parents went next. My dad talked about work ethic. My mom talked about how proud she was. I felt the particular specific ache of knowing that the night was being constructed as one thing and was actually another. Then my brother-in-law asked for the microphone. I don't know what I expected. I knew he was going to speak. My sister had mentioned it, said he'd been working on something. I assumed it would be gracious and a little performative, and I would thank him and we would move on. What he actually said was this. He talked about how much he'd contributed to the agency's growth. Specific numbers. Specific client wins. He framed 2 years of salaried employment as a partnership, as his investment in my dream, as something I hadn't fully acknowledged. Then, he said, and I will not forget this for as long as I live, that he thought it was time to talk about what that contribution was worth, and that he'd been patient, and that he hopes tonight could be the start of a real conversation about equity. In front of 60 people, at my party, with my parents standing 8 feet away. The room did that thing. Rooms do where everyone tries to look like they don't know what they just heard. My business partner's face went very still. My bookkeeper, who I had invited because she is someone I genuinely care about, caught my eye from across the room and looked like she was calculating how fast she could get to me. My sister was nodding, slowly, the way you nod when something has been rehearsed. I took the microphone. I want to be clear about what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters. I was not surprised. I had known something like this was coming. Not the exact shape of it, not the public setting, but the entitlement underneath it, yes. I had known for months. So what I felt was not shock. It was something colder than that. The particular calm that arrives when you've already made your decision and the other person has just confirmed it for you. I said thank you. I said it was a generous speech. I said I loved having people around me who were invested in the agency's success. I said it was a lot to think about, and I looked forward to continuing the conversation in a more appropriate setting. I said all of this pleasantly, and I handed the microphone back, and I smiled, and I went to the bathroom and stood at the sink for 90 seconds. Then I went back out and finished the party. My sister found me near the end of the night, when the room had thinned out and the caterers were quietly boxing things up. She looked like she was deciding how to play it. Sympathetic, I thought. She was going to go sympathetic. She said she hoped I wasn't upset. She said her husband was passionate about the work. She said he just wanted to feel valued. She said she thought he had a point, actually, about the equity conversation, and had I ever really thought about how much he'd given to this? I looked at my sister. I've known her for 32 years. I was there when she got her heart broken for the first time at 16, and I sat on the bathroom floor with her and didn't tell anyone. I co-signed her first apartment lease because her credit wasn't built yet and she needed someone to vouch for her. I paid for a significant portion of her wedding. I hired her husband. I have loved her in the specific exhausted way you love family who take more than they give, but who you keep showing up for anyway because you remember the bathroom floor, because you remember who she was before she learned that I would always come through. I said, very quietly, I think tonight's probably not the right time for this conversation. She said, when is the right time then? You always say that. And I said, Monday morning, my office, 9 o'clock, bring your husband. She thought that meant I was considering it. I could see it in the way her expression relaxed. I let her think that. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, I was already seated when they arrived. My lawyer was there. Our HR director was there. The printed documentation was on the table in a folder with my brother-in-law's name on it. I had given him the option, privately through my lawyer the previous Thursday, to resign quietly. He had not taken that option. He'd had his own lawyer send back a letter that used the word equity 4 times and implied that I had made promises I hadn't made. So we were here. I let my HR director walk through the findings. My brother-in-law's face did several things in the span of about 3 minutes. My sister's did one thing. She looked at me, and I could see exactly when she understood that this was not a conversation I had called to consider his request. He said it was a mistake. Then he said it wasn't what it looked like. Then he stopped talking because his lawyer had probably told him to stop talking if it ever came to this. My sister said my name, just my name, like a question, like she was asking me to be someone different than who I was sitting there being. I said that the termination was effective immediately, that there would be no severance given the circumstances, and that the matter was now in the hands of our legal team and his. I said I was sorry it had come to this. I meant part of that and not all of it. They left. My lawyer stayed for another 20 minutes to go over next steps. My HR director closed the folder and asked me if I was okay. I said I was. I meant that more. The legal process took 8 months. There were things I'm not going to detail because they're still somewhere in the technical aftermath, but the short version is, the money was recovered, there were consequences, and my brother-in-law no longer works in our industry in any capacity I'm aware of. My parents didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. My mom sent me a message that said she couldn't believe I would do this to the family, that I had humiliated my sister in front of people, that there had to have been another way. I read it twice, and then I set my phone down and I went for a walk, and I did not respond that day. I responded 3 days later. I wrote a single paragraph. I told her that I loved her and that what happened was not something I chose lightly, and that I would always welcome a real conversation if she wanted to have one. I said nothing about the money. I said nothing about the years of quiet pressure. I said nothing about the bathroom floor or the lease or the wedding or the hire. I had learned by then that saying those things didn't open doors. It just gave people something to argue about instead of the actual thing. My sister called me 4 months after everything concluded. She was not calling to apologize, exactly. She was calling to tell me that she was trying to understand and that she didn't know everything her husband had been doing and that she felt stupid and that she was angry at me and at him and at herself, and she didn't know what to do with all of it. I listened. I let her talk. When she was done, I said that I believed her about not knowing the extent of it. I said I didn't think she was stupid. I said that the part that was harder for me, the part I needed her to understand, wasn't just what her husband did. It was the toast. It was the nod. It was the way she'd come to me afterward and advocated for him, even then in that restaurant, with no idea what I was already carrying. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I always assumed you'd be okay no matter what. You were always the one who was okay. I think about that a lot. I think about all the invisible weight that gets stacked on the person who is always okay. How the assumption that someone can handle it becomes the permission to keep handing things to them. How love and exploitation can look identical from the outside and feel almost identical from the inside until they don't. We're not back to where we were. I don't know if we'll get there. We talk, occasionally. Carefully, like people learning to walk on ice. There's something between us that hasn't found its shape yet. Not forgiveness, not estrangement, something more honest than either. My parents came around eventually. My dad first. He called on a Sunday morning, which is when he calls when he's been thinking about something for a while, and he said he was sorry he hadn't asked me about my side before he reacted. He didn't say he fully understood. He didn't make it more than it was. That one sentence was enough. My mom took longer. She still hasn't said sorry exactly, but she stopped calling my brother-in-law's behavior a mistake and started calling it what it was, and for her, that's significant. The agency is fine, better than fine actually. Losing a salary we shouldn't have been paying freed up a position I filled with someone who has been, genuinely, one of the best hires I've ever made. I took that Portugal trip. It took me until last October, but I took it. There's a version of the story where I'm the villain, where I'm the sister who destroyed a marriage, estranged a family, chose my company over my blood. I've read that version in some of the things people have said since. I sat with it and turned it over. But here's what I keep coming back to. I did not create the conditions that led to that Monday morning. I did not ask for the toast. I did not design a system where one person is expected to carry everyone else and smile about it and be grateful for the opportunity. I responded to what was handed to me, and I responded with documentation instead of drama, and if that makes me the villain in someone else's version of events, I think I can live with that. What I couldn't live with was the alternative. The party was supposed to celebrate 11 years, and in a way, it did. Not the way anyone planned. But the version that actually happened, the version where I finally stopped managing other people's comfort at the cost of my own, that one felt, for the first time in a long time, like something worth celebrating. I used to think the hardest part of being the responsible one in a family was the work itself. The extra hours, the covered deposits, the co-signed documents, the quiet yes when you wanted to say no. I thought that was the cost. I thought if I just kept doing the right thing, kept building, kept showing up, the people around me would eventually meet me there. What I didn't understand, what took me 11 years and one very public humiliation to finally see, is that there's a version of loyalty that asks you to shrink yourself so everyone else can feel comfortable. And when you stop shrinking, some people experience that as a betrayal. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they built their expectations on a version of you that no longer exists. My brother-in-law stood at a microphone at a party thrown in my honor and demanded a share of something he had no right to claim, and the part that stayed with me longest wasn't the audacity of the ask. It was that he believed it would work. He had watched me absorb things for years. The pressure, the guilt, the soft suggestions passed through my mother like currency, and he concluded, reasonably, that I would absorb this too. That's what happens when you confuse someone's patience for permission. But here's the thing about what came next. I didn't act out of anger. I'd had months to be angry, and by the time that Monday morning arrived, the anger had burned down into something quieter and more precise. What I had was documentation. What I had was clarity. What I had was the understanding that protecting what I built wasn't cruelty, it was just finally taking my own side. There's a kind of intelligence that only comes from having been tested. Not the intelligence of knowing things, but the intelligence of knowing yourself well enough to act from your values instead of your fear. I had spent so long managing other people's feelings that I'd gotten very good at anticipating what they needed and not very good at asking what I needed. That Monday, I stopped anticipating. I just told the truth, plainly with evidence, and let the consequences land where they were going to land anyway. And the consequences were hard. 6 weeks of silence from my parents. The particular grief of watching my sister's face rearrange itself when she understood what was actually happening. None of that was clean or satisfying. People who tell you revenge feels good have usually never had to sit across a table from someone they once loved and watch everything shift. What actually felt good, eventually slowly, was the integrity of it, that I had handled the worst of it without becoming the worst of it, that I had not yelled at the party, had not sent the vindictive email I drafted at midnight and deleted by morning, had not let the ugliness of what he did determine how I responded. That took something I had to build deliberately over a very long time, the ability to feel the full weight of a situation and still choose the measured action over the satisfying one. I think about the bookkeeper who flagged the discrepancy. She did it because she was careful, because she had built a professional habit of paying attention, because she believed her job was to protect the thing she was trusted to protect. That's all any of us can do, really. Show up, pay attention, hold the line on what we know to be true, even when it would be easier not to. My sister asked me once, a few months after everything, how I had stayed so calm through all of it. I told her I hadn't, not always, not in private. But I had learned that calm is not the absence of feeling. It's the decision to let your values lead when your emotions want to. That's the only version of strength that actually holds.